Scary story time. Let's jump straight into the first story. Something sat with me while my mother slept. Hospitals have their own version of night. Not darkness suspension. Lights hum instead of turning off. Machines breathe for people. Time forgets how to move forward. I learned that during the week my mother was recovering from a neurological episode. She was stable enough to be moved out of intensive care and into a private room on an upper floor. The kind meant to reassure families. Clean, quiet, almost peaceful. The room had a sliding glass door that opened to a small exterior patio. No chairs out there, no plants. Just concrete and a railing overlooking nothing you'd ever want to look at for long. I hadn't slept properly in days. Grief-adjacent exhaustion, the kind where your body shuts down before your mind agrees. I remember sitting in the chair beside her bed, meaning to rest my eyes for a second. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember being asleep without being gone. The room stayed with me. The soft monitor beeps. My mother's breathing. The glow from the hallway leaking under the door. And then, threaded through it all, a feeling that something had changed its position. I heard footsteps. Not inside the room. Outside. On the patio. They were slow. Careful. Too careful. Each step landed flat, skin to surface. No shoes. No scuff. No hesitation. Bare feet. I opened my eyes just enough to look toward the glass. 2 feet stood inches from the door. They were pale in a way skin isn't supposed to be washed of color, like they'd never known blood or warmth. The toes pointed straight toward the glass, unmoving, as if whoever owned them was standing perfectly still. I felt it then, certainty. Not fear. Knowledge. If I looked any higher, something irreversible would happen. I turned my face away and shut my eyes hard. Time did something wrong after that. It stretched without passing. I couldn't move. Couldn't even swallow. The room felt occupied in a way I can't describe, like a thought had taken on weight. I knew it was watching. Not my mother. Me. My neck prickled with cold, like breath hovering just out of contact. The footsteps never moved closer, but the presence did. Not physically attention-wise. As if it were learning my outline. My breathing. The shape of my awareness. Eventually the pressure eased, not vanished, withdrew. I shifted in the chair, convincing myself I'd half-dreamed the whole thing. Muscle memory took over. I turned back toward the glass and opened my eyes. Something was sitting there. Inside the room. Crouched low, impossibly thin, knees drawn too close to its chest. Its body was darker than shadow, like light avoided it on purpose. Its head was tilted slightly, eyes wide and unblinking locked onto mine. It wasn't curious. It was finished looking. I screamed. The sound felt like it tore out of me. The thing reacted instantly, not startled so much as alerted. It moved in a way my brain still rejects. Not running, not crawling, it bounded. A jerking. Animal motion too fast. Too coordinated. Vanishing through the open patio door and over the railing in a blur of angles and silence. The room snapped back into itself. I was wide awake. Heart hammering, mouth burning. My mother stirred and asked what was wrong. I told her I'd had a bad dream. That was easier than explaining why I couldn't bring myself to look at the patio again. I stayed awake until morning. Nothing else happened. But even now, years later, I can still picture it perfectly, not its face, not its shape, but the way it sat there, like it had been waiting for me to notice. Like it had always been there, and just needed me to open my eyes. Whoa! Remind me to cancel my doctor's appointment. That was creepy. Next story. Something came to the door and never went away. I was 18 when my parents moved us out to the edge of nowhere, not the romantic kind of rural. No streetlights. No passing cars. Just a single narrow road with a handful of properties spaced far enough apart that you couldn't see your neighbors unless you tried. At night, the dark pressed in from every direction, thick and complete. That evening, my parents were gone until morning. I stayed behind with our dog, a big, aging retriever who slept lightly and took his job seriously. The house felt cavernous without other people in it, every sound echoing just a little too long. I was upstairs on the couch, a movie murmuring low, drifting in and out of sleep. Then the knocking started. 3 strikes. Heavy. Exact. They didn't ask permission. They didn't hesitate. They weren't drunk or confused or unsure. Whoever knocked knew exactly where they were and exactly what they wanted. My dog exploded into motion, snarling before his paws even hit the floor. He charged down the stairs, barking in a way I'd never heard before, deep, panicked, furious. The kind of bark animals use when something doesn't belong. I froze halfway down the staircase. The front door sat at the bottom, framed by darkness. The courtyard outside was unlit, a black void swallowing the porch light before it could reach the ground. "Hello?" I called. Nothing answered. Not wind, not breath, not movement. The silence afterward felt deliberate, like something had leaned closer to listen. I called out again, louder, forcing confidence into my voice. The sound seemed to die before it reached the door. After a long, crawling pause, I descended the rest of the stairs. My dog planted himself in front of the door, teeth bared, body rigid, eyes fixed on the wood as if he could see through it. I cracked the door open. The night stared back. No person. No shadow pulling away. No footsteps retreating across gravel. Just empty space and cold air that smelled faintly of earth and iron. It was as if whatever had knocked had never been there at all. I locked the door. Then every other door. Every window. I called my parents with shaking hands. They called the nearest neighbors, a couple who lived close enough to hear if something went wrong. They arrived quickly, too quickly. They listened to my story without interrupting, then exchanged a look I didn't understand. They took flashlights and walked the property, checking the barns, the sheds, the perimeter. I stayed inside with the dog, counting his breaths. When they came back, they said they'd found nothing. Still, they urged me strongly to come sleep at their place. There was an edge to their voices that didn't match their words, like they were trying not to say something else. I refused. I wouldn't leave the dog alone in that house. Before they left, they told me to call them if anything else happened, even if it felt stupid, even if it felt small. The next day, my parents installed cameras pointed at the front door and courtyard. They said it was for peace of mind. No one ever checked the footage unless there was a reason. Months passed. At my parents' anniversary dinner, I found myself thanking the woman from next door again for coming that night. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then she went quiet. Finally, she sighed and said she needed to tell me something. That night before my parents called her, she'd been outside tending to her animals. The air had been dead still. No wind, no insects, no distant engines. That's when she heard footsteps. Not running, not wandering. Measured steps crunching through the gravel in our courtyard. She said they were clear enough to map in her head. Slow, even, intentional. The sound carried too well, as if the night wanted her to hear it. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside our house. She waited for a door to open, for someone to speak, for the steps to move again. Nothing happened. Moments later, my parents' call came through. She never heard the footsteps leave. And sometimes late at night, when I visit my parents, I still catch my dog standing at the bottom of the stairs, staring at the front door, tail low, ears rigid, listening. Like he's waiting for something that already knows the way inside. Oh man, that was a scary one. I hope your doors are locked. While you're checking, hit the like and subscribe button. Okay, next story. Red door, yellow door. This happened when I was about 15 or 16, freshman year of high school. I'm almost 21 now, and somehow this memory has never faded. It doesn't feel old. It feels dormant. Back then, I was a skater. That was my whole identity. I had a small group of friends, 6 of us, maybe, and we spent our weekends skating, drinking, smoking, doing exactly what you'd expect a bunch of reckless teenagers to do. One weekend, we decided to stay the night at one of our friends' houses so we could skate early the next morning. By around 1 a.m., we were all drunk enough to be bored but not tired, sprawled across her living room in dim light. Music low, the air thick with smoke and laughter. That's when she suggested a game. Red door, yellow door. Everyone else already knew about it. I didn't. When I asked her to explain, she lowered the lights even more before she spoke, like the explanation itself needed darkness. You lay your head in someone's lap. Close your eyes. Raise your arms straight up. Everyone chants red door, yellow door, any other color door over and over. The person you're laying on rubs your temples. Eventually, your arms get heavy. When they drop, you slip into a trance. She said it casually, like it was harmless. She'll ask you questions, she added. You just describe what you see. People laughed. Took shots. Agreed immediately. I went last. I watched everyone else go first. One friend said she saw an ocean, but the water was purple and the sky was bright red. Another described black frogs hopping through blue grass toward a yellow door. Others talked about strange animals, colorful hallways, nonsense dream stuff. Nothing scary. By the time it was my turn, I honestly thought it either wouldn't work on me or it'd be funny. I laid my head back, raised my arms, closed my eyes. The chanting started. At first, nothing happened. My arms stayed steady, too steady. 5 minutes passed and they still didn't feel tired. Then, all at once, the weight hit me like gravity doubled. My arms dropped on their own, and I fell. Not asleep. Not unconscious. Somewhere in between. I could still hear Elle's voice, distant but clear, asking me what I saw. Nothing, I said. It's just white. An endless, empty white space. She asked me to turn around. The white vanished instantly. It became pitch black, so dark it felt solid, like I was trapped inside it. She asked if I could move. I tried. I couldn't. No forward, no backward. No sound. Just pressure, like the darkness itself was holding me still. Then she told me to turn around again. And suddenly, I was in a room. I recognized it immediately. It was one of the abandoned military houses at Fort Ord, the ones I grew up exploring as a kid. Same shape, same layout, but wrong. The walls were pitch black, swallowing the light. Outside the windows wasn't night, it was blinding white, like nothing existed beyond the glass. No sky, no ground. It felt like being suspended between places. Not alive, not dead. I started describing it to Elle, my voice shaking, when I heard something. Not from the room I was physically in, from inside the place I was seeing. I turned around. There were 5 figures, standing in a circle around a fire burning in the middle of the room. They wore red jumpsuits. Their faces were hidden behind goat skulls, empty eye sockets staring straight through me. They were holding something. A baby. Dead. The moment I saw it, something inside me locked. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't open my eyes. I could hear Elle calling my name, her voice growing louder, panicked, but I couldn't respond. I don't know how long I was stuck there. Seconds? Minutes. It felt endless. Then suddenly, I was being shaken hard. I woke up gasping, my face soaked in tears, my whole body trembling like I'd been freezing. Everyone was staring at me. No one was laughing anymore. I tried to explain what I'd seen, but the words felt wrong. Incomplete, like what I experienced couldn't exist outside of that moment. I still don't know why I woke up crying. I still don't know why that was what I saw when everyone else saw colors and doors. And I still don't know why, even now, years later, thinking about it makes my chest tighten. So, I have to ask, if you've played Red Door, Yellow Door, has anything like this ever happened to you? I think I'm going to take a break from playing games for a while. Let's continue on to the next story. What was that? Back in July, a few of my cousins and I went camping on a stretch of family-owned land in rural Middle Tennessee. It sits along a quiet inlet connected to a massive lake popular during the summer. But this particular pocket is far enough removed that almost no one ever wanders into it. getting there feels like leaving the world behind. You drive past the last gas station, then another 10 miles beyond that, before turning onto a gravel road so narrow it feels accidental. It dead ends at a clearing where you park, shoulder your gear, and hike nearly a mile on foot. No signage. No cell service. Just trees closing in tighter the farther you go. The trail is uncomfortable in a way I can't quite explain. To your left, the land climbs sharply into thick woods old, tangled growth with faint paths that once belonged to horseback riders decades ago. To your right, the ground drops straight down toward the water, too steep to descend safely. Through gaps in the trees, you can see the cove below and the opposite hillside untouched forest that hasn't been logged or cleared in generations. Once you reach the campsite, it almost feels like a trap. Perfectly flat ground right at the water's edge. Behind it, a steep wooded slope with no trail, no clearing, no obvious way out. Just trees. Dense and watching. We set up camp, swam, cooked, laughed. My dog ran around like he always did. Everything felt familiar. Normal. We'd been there countless times growing up. That's why it took us a moment to notice when things changed. Not long after the sun went down, we heard rocks tumbling behind us. Small at first. A few clicks and scrapes as something disturbed the hillside. We assumed it was an animal, maybe a deer or a raccoon heading toward the water. But animals move through an area. This didn't. The sounds drifted left, then right, then stopped, then started again behind us. Always just out of sight. Never committing. It felt like pacing. After a while, one of my cousins grabbed the small hatchet we'd used earlier and tapped it against a rock 3 sharp knocks, hoping to scare whatever it was away. The woods went silent instantly. No insects. No leaves. Even the water seemed to still. Then, from directly behind us, deep in the tree line, came the answer. Tap, tap, tap. Perfectly spaced, perfectly mimicked. No one laughed. We talked about leaving, but the trail out was long, narrow, and pitch black. Hiking it at night felt worse than staying put. So we retreated into our tent, a massive 12-person tent that easily fit the 5 of us and my dog. For a few minutes, the tension eased. Fabric walls feel safer than they should. Then we heard voices, low, muted, male, not yelling, not whispering, just talking. Right outside the tent. My dog noticed before any of us moved. He lifted his head, completely rigid, eyes locked on the tent wall, but he didn't make a sound. He didn't growl, didn't bark. That scared me more than anything else. After a while, I slowly unzipped the tent and looked out. Nothing. No people. No movement. No footprints. Just moonlit trees and still water. I told myself, sound carries weirdly across lakes at night. I laid back down. I must have fallen asleep, because I woke to my cousin shaking my arm gently, urgently. The voices were back. Moonlight filtered through the tent just enough to reveal a shape outside. Not detailed, just a darker mass blocking the faint glow. I nudged another cousin awake and pressed a finger to my lips before pointing. No one moved. The shape began to walk. Slowly, carefully. Circling the tent. Again. And again. We could hear something brushing against the fabric soft. Intentional contact. Like fingers. Like inspection. Whatever it was stayed there for hours. Long enough for the sky to start turning gray. When someone finally worked up the courage to unzip the tent, there was nothing there. No tracks. No damage. No explanation. We convinced ourselves it had been an animal, a big one. Maybe a cat, maybe a coyote. The voices? Just echoes over water. Fear filling in gaps. We decided to stay through the day but leave before dark. Time slipped away faster than it should have. By the time we noticed the sky shifting from blue to orange, sunset was already settling in. We packed quickly, not frantic but rushed. Like something was counting down. The air felt thick, pressurized. Wrong. Then, from the woods behind us, it came. A sound so loud it echoed down the cove and across the water. It sounded like a human scream, layered with something animal. Broken, strained, furious. We didn't investigate. We left everything we could afford to. Whatever was out there never showed itself. But it made sure we understood one thing: we were never alone. Well, that was scary. Let's go to the next story. I should have taken the long way home. I was 16 the first time I realized that silence can be louder than noise. I grew up in a small coastal town in Australia, the kind where everyone knows your name and nothing ever really happens. My house sat opposite a stretch of scrubland that most people avoided at night. It wasn't fenced off or anything, just a dirt access track that cut through thick bush and shaved 15 minutes off the walk into town. During the day, it was harmless. Sun-bleached grass, gum trees, red dust. Kids rode bikes through there. I'd walked it dozens of times. Just never that late. That night I'd been at a boy's place, my first real boyfriend. We lost track of time watching a movie and woke up to the clock glowing 10:57 p.m. His parents were strict, no exceptions, no staying over. He hugged me at the door and shut it behind me. I remember standing on the sidewalk for a second, debating whether to take the lit streets or the bush track. The long route meant another 20 minutes alone. The shortcut meant 10. I chose 10. The moon was bright enough to cast shadows. Silver light spilled between the trees, and the wind moved steadily through the branches. It should have felt peaceful. Halfway in, the wind kept blowing. But everything else stopped. No crickets. No distant cars. No shifting brush. Just wind and dead air. I slowed without meaning to. My footsteps sounded too loud against the dirt. I became hyper-aware of my breathing, of the way the trees seemed taller than I remembered. Then I felt it. Not heard. Not seen. Felt. That prickling heat at the base of your skull. The certainty that something is standing too close behind you. My body reacted before my mind did. Every muscle tightened. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. I told myself not to look. I looked anyway. About 20 meters back on the track stood a shape that didn't belong. It wasn't detailed. It wasn't solid in a normal way. It was darker than the night around it, too tall, too narrow, wrong in proportion. Like a smudge cut out of the air. And its eyes, I don't know how to describe them except that they weren't reflecting light. They were producing it. 2 faint points fixed directly on me. The moment we made eye contact, something shifted in the air between us. Not movement, not sound. Just intent. I ran. I don't remember deciding to. I just moved. The trees blurred. Branches scratched my arms. I don't know if I heard footsteps behind me or if my brain invented them, but I didn't stop to check. When I reached my street, I didn't slow down. I vaulted the side fence, cut across the yard, and climbed through my bedroom window. I didn't look back until I was inside. The yard was empty. The street was empty. But the feeling wasn't. It lingered like humidity. Thick. Observing. I barely slept. When I did, it was light and fractured. 3 nights later, I woke up gasping. No sound had woken me. No dream that I could remember, just the feeling. The air in my room felt different, charged, like before a storm. My window was open, just a few centimeters. I knew I had shut it. I had checked it twice before bed. The latch was loose. It had always been loose, but I was careful now. I got up and closed it without looking outside. I didn't want confirmation. That's when the dreams began. In them, I would wake to the soft scrape of the windows sliding upward. Not fast, not forced, just patient. Sometimes I'd see fingers curl over the sill. Too long, too thin. Sometimes I wouldn't see anything at all, just feel something standing at the foot of my bed, waiting for me to open my eyes. I stopped sleeping properly. I started leaving lights on. I told no one. Eventually, I wedged a piece of timber into the window track so it physically couldn't slide open. I tested it from outside during the day. It held. The window never moved again. But the dreams didn't fully stop. They just changed. Now, instead of trying the window, whatever it was would just stand outside it, watching. Head tilted slightly, like it was studying something complicated. Years have passed. I moved away, built a life, rationalized it as stress, imagination, teenage fear. Most nights, I sleep fine. But sometimes, usually when the air goes very still, I wake up before something happens. And for a split second, before I fully open my eyes, I know exactly where I am. 16 years old. Moonlight on the trees. Halfway down that dirt track. And something in the bush, realizing I can see it. Wow, creepy. Those were our stories for the day. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you for watching.